Hey everyone, it's Reagan. I want to personally invite you to listen to my new podcast, a space where the truth is spoken, stories are honored, and families finally get their voice back. You see, for years, CPS and the family court system have operated in the shadows, removing children without cause, silencing parents, and weaponizing power against the vulnerable. But on this show, the silence ends. Every episode, I sit with parents, survivors, and advocates to talk openly, trauma informed, judgment free, about what really happens behind closed doors. Not rumors, not speculation, lived experience. If you've ever felt unheard, dismissed, or steamrolled by the system, this podcast is for you. If you're fighting for your children right now, this podcast is for you. And if you've never seen this side of the system before, you need to. Your awareness, your voice, and your presence, they matter. And together, we're reclaiming what was taken.
Yeah, I don't want you to worry about redacting any information about me. Don't worry about that. My life is an open book. I don't hide anything from anybody. And I am forthcoming with everything that I tell you for the simple fact that you can't get to the bottom of the truth until you tell the truth.
Right.
So I have
Correct.
nothing to hide from anybody. If they want to judge, judge. That's on you.
Yeah. So, just along those lines, if for some reason we stumble across anything and you decide that that's a little touchy situation, you just let me know and we can
We're
move
good.
past it.
We're good.
Obviously, anything that we talk about here and the responses that you provide, I ask that you make sure that the testimony is factual and that it is somewhere, some shape or form documented. That way, we're not spreading speculation or what have you.
Okay.
And so we're gonna start the questions if you're ready.
Okay.
I just need your consent.
Yes, ma'am. We can proceed.
So there's two questions here, and it's basically like an opening outline here that I've got. And thank you so much for being here. Would you please state your name and the state of the case where the Child Protective Services issues took place in your case?
Jennifer Johnson. The case is in Anderson County, Anderson, South Carolina.
Very good. And this was approximately 8 years ago that this battle began for you?
Started in 2011.
And can you share a little about yourself and your family before the CPS became involved?
Before CPS came involved in the household was my daughter and my son. And CPS, since CPS has, the kids have aged out of the system. My son passed away last year in April, and my daughter is now at the age of about to be 26.
And so let's talk about before the CPS became involved. How old were they then? And were there any medical conditions?
There were approximately 10 and 11. And my son was born with polycystic kidney disease and posterior valve blockages. He was born with that, so that was already existing when CPS came in. My daughter was completely healthy, nothing wrong with her. My son was also developmentally delayed, so he had an IEP. And he was in a birth to 3 program and continued on with IEP throughout his school years.
And this was a condition that was diagnosed before or at birth or before CPS became involved, correct?
He was diagnosed at birth.
Okay. And tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, just to elaborate so that the people listening understand when we get into talking about, the medical kidnapping and whatnot, what exactly is that diagnosis mean for a person?
So medical kidnapping for us was basically, they knew that they were going to get more money to take my son into custody, which was the first one that was taken into custody. He was already in custody approximately 3 to 4 weeks before they came to get my daughter. They took over his medical care. I had no choices in anything. I was able to attend a few doctor's appointments only for the kidney specialist because he was post-transplant. But other than that, I was not invited to mental health care of any kind, because he was showing oppositional defiance disorder, and ADHD is what they claimed. Later, we found out it was autism, which they refused to diagnose him for. Um, they chose his mental health medications. I had no choice in any of that. They chose his primary care doctor. I had not attended any of those appointments, any vaccinations. They chose that for him. I had basically no say so in his medical care. I could only attend just the kidney doctor appointments.
Okay. And so at that point, when your son was removed, you had already he had already had the kidney transplant you told me about,
Yes,
correct?
yes. He had
Okay.
it at
And
the age of 2.
oh my goodness, God bless his heart. What was the first moment that, if you can pinpoint a specific point or scenario that took place when you realized that the system had turned against you, that this was not just your average situation and that there was something fishy going on?
So originally there was supposed to be a caseworker that came in. I already had an open case. I had gone through a domestic violence situation, very open and honest with the CPS workers. They told me they wanted me to find new housing, allowed me to place my children with a very good friend of mine at the time. And I found the new housing, and a CPS worker told me I could go get the kids, but they needed to come in and look around and make sure the environment was appropriate. I had no problem with that. CPS worker never showed. Second CPS worker came in, and I knew the second that she hit my doorstep and came into my front door, it was over. She went through cabinets. She looked all through all the rooms, made sure she went in my refrigerator, kind of poking around in the kids' rooms, making sure that they had clean clothes. Nothing was in disarray in my house. Because of my son's condition, I was very immaculate, very clean person. Um, but I just knew in my heart that she was coming to get my daughter. There was no doubt in my mind. And it was probably about 2.5 to 3 weeks later, they took her out of school and took her from me.
And at that point, had they already taken your son into their care?
I had to do that. They charged me with potential harm and neglect. They kept me off a child central registry list in South Carolina because I did not touch or hurt either one of my children in any kind of way. No bumps, no bruises, no ER visits for anything other than cough, cold, something simple like that. Um, they said they had to charge me with something to get my son help. Now, keep in mind, I begged DFACS for help with my son's behavior. He was ODD, ADHD. I had bruises all over me, and so did his sister, because he was very violent and volatile at home. He had sudden outbursts, was lashing out at family, just, because it was just her and me in the house. I had
Before
been,
or after the drugs that they were the medications that they were giving him that you did not authorize?
he was doing this before. I,
Huh.
I don't know what happened after they took him into care, because I was not allowed to see him but maybe once a month.
Okay, so
They
let me
weren't
just back
allowing me
up just a
visits.
little bit. It
Yep.
sounds like they kind of coerced you into accepting some kind of charge with the
Yeah,
idea behind it that you wouldn't be listed as an offender on any kind of, nationwide
exactly.
list, but that this was required in order for your son to get the care, correct?
Exactly what happened. Exactly. And even when I started to question, like, what is this central registry list? What does this entail? Would I ever be able to adopt a child if I wanted to? Would I be able to become a foster parent? What is going to happen to me after you claim to charge me with these things that I did not do? No one could answer me. No one ever answered me.
What was the explanation they gave you? It was basically just that they needed something documented in order for them to get the care that he needed?
Keep in mind, I had already gone to DJJ and DFACS begging them for help because they said they had to have 2 state agencies to place him into medical care for his mental health. I had already found a facility. This is what the facility is telling me. I've already gone to DFACS. They said I had to find a secondary. They didn't say whether they would or would not. DJJ never responded to me either until my son committed assault and battery to the 2nd degree on another child at a bus stop. That's when the case became open and he was placed into DJJ custody with DFACS overseeing.
Let me ask you about the history of your home life prior to the DCF with the issues that you were having with your son. Was there any kind of violence in the home that could have potentially uh, caused him to behave like this?
I had been in two different CDV or domestic violence situations with two different boyfriends that I had at the time. There was space between the two, but it wasn't enough to provoke that. Terrence started showing these symptoms back in kindergarten, way before DFACS ever got involved. So I was already seeking help for the longest time. But when we made the transition to South Carolina, after me leaving my, what ends up being my ex-husband, um, the symptoms got worse and I was unable to handle him at home by myself.
All right. Now I'd like to move into the court and the CPS experience specifically.
Okay.
So, after they removed your child, your first child, and then, leading up to and after they took the second child, what actions did CPS or family court take that you believe were unjust or unlawful? Besides the one that we just spoke about, the situation where they coerced you into accepting some kind of charge so that they could get him help and then cut you out of his care. What else would you say the family courts did that you believe was unjust or unlawful?
Um, me being a paralegal, when you charge somebody with a crime, doesn't matter whether it's misdemeanor, felony, any type of crime, you are, should be allowed a jury by your peers. I never got any of that. I was given the longest treatment plan known to man for marijuana use, which I admitted to them about. I find out after my children age out of the system that my hair samples were tainted by Lab Corp with somebody else's through another DFACS worker that's no longer working in the system. I demanded a retest. I had no cocaine in my hair or my urine within 24 hours of the first test. And DFACS attorney told me directly that doesn't matter. We've got the kids. We're not giving them back. That's what I was told in the entry of the courtroom when my
So,
attorney.
so you're saying that there was tampering with your hair sample,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
what exactly did they say originally was supposedly present on your hair sample?
So I tested positive for cocaine and marijuana is what they claim. Within 24 hours, I only had marijuana in my hair and urine. No cocaine, none. And it was after my children exited out of the DFAC system, I made contact with someone that had looked into my CPS case, who was no longer with DFACS. She couldn't talk to me at the time when she first found it. And she had a conversation that I was not privy to with a Lab Corp employee who admitted that I was one of 30 other families in the state of South Carolina who had their hair samples tainted with stuff that wasn't in their hair or their urine. And there was nothing I could do about it. Kids were already gone.
Yeah. Okay. How did the judges, attorneys, or other officials treat you during the process? Were they forthcoming with you? Were they
No,
inclusive of you? Were
no.
they rude and dismissive? Did they hear your
Anytime,
claims?
anytime I tried to ask a question in court, I was shut down. It was for my lawyer to explain and talk to the judge about. I was not allowed to speak in court unless I was spoken to. As far as the DFACS officials, attorney for DFACS was extremely nasty. You couldn't talk to her for nothing. I mean, prime example, when my attorney approached her and said, "Hey, there's no cocaine in her hair or urine. How does that happen within 24 hours of the first test?" Doesn't matter. We're keeping the kids. And she walks off with her little briefcase.
So
I mean,
they tested you prior to removal and claimed that there was something there, and then they listened to you and did
oh no,
another test
yeah,
and found that there was nothing there.
correct.
Okay, well, the legal limit for cocaine or something of that nature to be in your system would be in your urine, it's 72 hours.
It should have
And
still been
so,
in my
but in
hair
your
follicles.
hair, you can test up to a year prior.
Yep. And there was
Okay,
nothing.
so that's a good point right there. I want you to make a note of that if you have this conversation again in the future, that's a very important thing there. And let me just quickly ask you, Lost my train of thought. I was going to ask you, based on what you were saying, did you happen to get a record of either one of those?
They claim they're in the defects records. Here's the thing. When somebody tests positive for cocaine or urine with defects, there's repetitive testing that's supposed to happen to make sure that the person, if they're trying to attempt to get their children back, they're supposed to keep repetitively testing you. I voluntarily tested both blood, urine, in any way I could. If I had an ER visit, test my blood. Please send it over to my caseworker. And they did. Not once after that initial first two tests, the first one and the one 24 hours later, did anybody from defects ever have me tested again. Ever.
Yeah,
To this
because
day.
they had already accomplished their mission.
Exactly.
So the original question was, did you get records of any of those false or positive, negative, whatever testing?
Whatever tests I have are in my medical file with the hospital system in Anderson, South Carolina, and was submitted to DFACS, which should be in my DFACS file. I don't have any with me to show proof like right this second, but if I had
No,
to
no, but
request
I
medical
mean,
records, yeah.
okay, so there are
Mhm.
medical records,
Yeah,
there is a paper trail. That's what I was
yeah.
kind of getting
Oh,
at.
yeah, definitely.
Um, and were there moments when you feel that your constitutional rights, parental rights, you felt they were ignored or violated?
Always. You know, I like I spoke of last night when we talked. I was forced to choose between my medically needy son and my daughter, who didn't need medical help. She needed her mama. And they told me if I fought for my son, I'd lose my daughter. If I fought for my daughter, I would lose my son. It was a no-win situation. That was a violation of my parental rights right there. I mean, my parental rights were violated when they gave my kids iPads and I begged them not to. And then the next thing I know, I'm getting calls from the guardian ad litem and the defects worker a couple of days later of, oh yeah, guess what? They've been in contact with pornographic material. I'm like, great. My kids didn't have access to that stuff at home. They had a little flip phone for a case of emergency. That didn't have internet access, that had text and talk only. They were 10 and 11 years old. They had no business with an iPad. I can understand even like their home computer. The foster family had a home computer. Why was my son on a home computer by himself, supposedly doing homework, but just so happened to get into pornographic material?
Yeah, and
Why
I
were you not
remember you were
overseeing that?
saying something about the live-in foster brother of your daughter that
Mhm.
was she was spending time with him too, and that was questionable.
He had pictures of her on his as a screensaver. She was wearing his clothing. She was telling me how she just lounges around on his bed and hangs out with him in his bedroom. That's inappropriate. That shouldn't be happening. This boy is about to go to
You said she
college.
was 11 or so at the time?
It started at 11 and then it continued on until her sophomore year of high school. That's not her biological brother. And even if it was, you're still supposed to supervise that stuff. They didn't. My son came home telling me when he aged out that foster dad would spend a lot of time in the car at night, kind of like, his calming down period. He would listen to music. They're finding empty beer cans in the back seat of the car. He's smoking marijuana. They got jars of marijuana in the garage.
Was that boy a minor as well?
Yeah, he hadn't gone off to college yet.
Okay. Now I'd like to ask you to consider the impact that this has happened, that this has had on your family, your family dynamic, the emotional and physical experiences. How has this experience affected you and your children emotionally and physically? And you know,
Best way I can put it without putting tears, and I'm trying really hard not to cry. I lost 8 years or more of my son's life. He's not here anymore. It was a waste of time where I could have been loving on my child while he was still on this earth. He was angry when he came home, not at me, but at the system for failing him. He was put in a group home with runaway kids that he didn't need to be there. He wasn't a runaway. He had mental health issues and needed their help, and they failed him. My daughter wound up being diabetic, falls down, chips her tooth, and here she'd been starving herself. And they lied to me. Oh yeah, she was playing around at a park. She tripped and fell on a rock and the rock accidentally chipped her tooth. No, she fell in the bathtub. She passed out from not eating and starving herself. And then they failed to get her diabetes medicine. They started it. She took it for a couple months. That was it. Nobody ever followed back up with it. They let her quit the original family therapist that was making progress with her because the foster family didn't like her. I don't care. That was helping. You wrecked my family. We were all we had. And the relationship I have with my daughter now is just volatile. Like, she only believes half of what I'm telling her. Like, I can't go back in time and pull out a movie reel for her to see the crap that I went through. What they did, they tore it apart. Anything and everything that I did for my kids. My daughter ceases to believe it. She doesn't even remember good times. She's been brainwashed. All she knows is the foster family and how great they are, and they're stable, and they're this and they're that. But in all reality, they failed her too. They didn't teach her budgeting. She lost her first apartment and wound up homeless and had to come back with them. She's 26 years old with a husband that's 30 and still living in their freaking basement. I
And
had
you
to
feel
sit there.
like that's due to the trauma that she experienced as a child
Oh,
in
she's
the
got
system.
separation anxiety like you wouldn't believe.
Hmm.
My son had separation anxiety. They both suffer from depression. I mean, I've not had her diagnosed, but with him, it was separation anxiety. He has autism because I had to have him diagnosed with the autism after he aged out and came home. DFACS refused. They wouldn't believe me, and they just didn't even want to attempt to try. Then there was it was anxiety, depression, autism. He had a lot, and then like later on, it wound up the anxiety and the depression caused him pseudo seizures because his body would literally shut down from the not knowing of what was going to happen to him. All these medical procedures and things from the dialysis and the kidney failure all over again because his kidney failed finally in 2019 after he came home, thank God. And I was there for him. All the stuff that they put him through, he ended up with pseudo seizures, constantly convulsing, sometimes hours at a time. It was chaos. Like they tore everybody and everything that you could imagine apart. There and then they send them home. And there's no help after that. They don't come back and check on him because he just came home. They don't care what happened to him. They probably don't even know he died.
Just for the record here, for the people listening, I want to just indicate what a pseudo seizure is.
So,
And it is
and
now more accurately called a psychogenic non-epileptic seizure, PNES, which
yes,
are events that mimic epileptic seizures but lack the abnormal brain electrical activity characteristic of epilepsy. Instead, they have a psychological origin, often triggered by emotional distress, stress, or psychological conflict. And the diagnosis relies on video encephalography or EEG to rule out epileptic activity during an event. And treatment focuses on addressing underlying mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, or trauma, which is exactly indicative of what we're talking about here, that a child in his position, being ripped away from his mother and his home and his sibling, and being thrust into this disgusting situation where not only are you not able to visit with them and care for them, but you're also not even permitted to take part in the decision making of their care.
keep in mind when these pseudo seizures started, it was like DFACS all over again. We were going through COVID, and I could not be present. They would not allow me in his hospital room to be there. I was there for every procedure up until COVID, as much as I could be during the DFACS time. Whatever they would allow me to do, I would be present. Before
And you were
DFACS,
for some time
everything.
you were on like supervised visits or something like that.
Sparingly, we'll put it like that, sparingly. And most of the time it had to happen with the family therapist, which was also their regular therapist on a personal level. But there was a point in time, even with Terrence getting sick and in the hospital, I'm not supposed to be with him unsupervised. How do I end up with my child in my arms, IV in his arm, carrying him to my personal vehicle to rush him to another hospital? How does that happen? But I'm not supposed to have unsupervised visits. Is that not confusing to you?
It seems like there's a lot of, inconsistencies in the process, and that people just aren't being accountable for their responsibilities, because like you're pointing out here, if you are, written that you have supervised visits, then those visits, and I know personally from having visits with another child that was not mine years ago, that was caught up in the system, I was supervised. There was literally a playroom and a woman sitting there with us the entire time, heard every conversation that we had, saw every eye glance or smile that we passed towards one another. So I know exactly what you mean whenever you refer to supervised visits. They were not taking their job seriously. And if it's like that with just the visitation side of things, then how much worse is it on the parts that you're not privy to, is the question. So,
It's
um,
even still with defects. You still get those supervised visits where, yes, they're sitting on top of you. But even when you went in the group home gave me more. But the group home told me I wasn't a bad mom. The group home workers would tell me what a great mom I was. Um, the fact that I'm there for every birthday, every holiday, every other weekend, even. And they didn't even feel the need to supervise me when I was in the building. I could take my son outside and we could go sit on the bench and we would sit and talk about everything and anything under the sun. And then all of a sudden,
keep
when
in
my daughter,
mind that these are workers that you're
yeah,
referring to, is
yeah.
what it sounds like, and they are essentially not uh, privy to any of the financial. They're basically there for an hourly rate. They're not privy to any of the financial stipends or stipends, however some
I
people
mean,
could
they're
take
being
them.
paid. The facility was being paid by DFACS because Terrence was no longer, my son was
Right,
no
but these are
longer,
hourly employees that can
yeah,
see that you're doing a good job, whereas they
yep,
don't have any authority to say if if the child should be let to go home with
correct,
you, or of anything
correct,
of that nature.
correct.
So what has been the personal toll on you, like financially, emotionally, spiritually? I mean, I can imagine, that you're just beside yourself with anger and frustration and, fear, and tell me about the impact on you personally.
Homeless for a while, at the mercy of friends that would take me in and let me sleep on the couch for
And
an
that was due
exchange
to
for,
your emotional or mental state.
yeah, it was, this was a very small town, hard to find a job. Um, They took Terrence's disability away from me, which never was a really key factor. I would try to hold a job, but because of my son's behavior, I was losing jobs left and right. So I couldn't keep a job for anything anyway. Once they went into defects custody, I had to resort to McDonald's in order to keep from going to jail because I had to pay child support. Not only are they getting his disability check, but then I got to pay child support now because they
So
decided to
so so
take my
you had
kids.
to pay child support to the state?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
That's a constitutional right violation. That is a
Well,
civil right violation. That's absurd. So
they
they're
did.
getting
They
money
forced
from
child
every
support.
angle.
Yep. Yep, they took me to the cleaners to where I had maybe $125 every 2 weeks if I was lucky to live off of. My kids don't realize what I went through, and nor would I tell them because that's not their burden to bear. It's mine. But at the same time, they tore my family apart. I had a nervous breakdown after I had to sign my rights over. He was my boyfriend back then, but now my second husband. I'm thankful every day for him being there for me because without him, I don't think I would have pulled through that.
So you
Spiritually,
just touched on something that I wanted to make sure that we elaborate on just a little bit. You said when you signed the rights over to your daughter, and I remember from our previous conversation that you were saying that they basically forced you to do that. Can you elaborate there a little?
that's where I mentioned earlier that they chose to tell me that I had to pick my daughter or my son. If I chose my daughter, I would lose my son, who has no father in his life. I was all he had. My daughter had a father, never really played a part in her life, but I knew that I had to trust the foster family. I had nobody else to turn to. I had no immediate family that would take her in, not anybody stable anyway. And there wasn't much that I could do. I had no choice but to hand over my daughter to them to save my son, who needed me medically more than anybody in the world. And it wasn't for lack of loving my daughter. God knows. She'll never know how bad that tore me apart, ever. Worst choice I've ever had to make in my life was to pick between my children.
So that was the second time, at least the second, or potentially more, that you were. So the first time that they forced you or coerced you into agreeing to something was the situation where you had to take a charge so that your son could get medical help. And then you had to sign your daughter's rights to your daughter over for what reason?
They chose to terminate my rights. They said that the kids had been in care too long, and that my daughter wanted to be adopted by her foster family, which they were going to allow because they said I was an unstable parent.
Mm. Okay.
So
And what resources or protections were denied to you that could have made a difference in all of this impactful, emotional, psychological, financial, spiritual, um, trauma that you and your children have experienced?
they didn't offer anything. There was nothing. Nothing. There was
Nothing
the
was
only thing.
offered.
The only thing that they actually probably paid for to that somewhat remotely helped in the beginning was the family therapist slash regular therapist. Um, and then I found out later that she was telling my kids stuff that was untrue as well, because of course, she works for defects, so she's being paid by defects. And she told a lot of untruths to my daughter, which caused her to make the decision to want to terminate my rights.
And so did you make any requests to them, like longer time to pay or less child support to pay or, maybe an ADA to help you to get through the
That's for
process of,
anything. They gave
pardon?
me, they let me keep 1 month of my son's disability, told me I needed to find a job so that I could get housing to be able to bring my kids home. After that, there was nothing. There was no financial help. Um, there was no help to try to find an apartment. There was no help to help me get a car, because at that point, when you don't have a job and, your kids are in custody and you're running here, there, and everywhere to all these different appointments and everything, I lost my car.
So
Um,
with a little bit of of my own understanding of the processes of, how this is all supposed to work with the reunification mandates and supposed um, regulations that they need to follow and pieces of the puzzle that they need to put together in order to help you to reunify with the children. It sounds to me like not only did they hinder you, but they altogether stripped you of any potential resource that and never offered you any kind of assistance in trying to recuperate your children and bringing them back to reunify them with
well,
you. Is that correct?
it was constant lies. 1 minute the defects worker, because everybody changed over in this case. So I had a new guardian ad litem at one point because the original one quit. He didn't agree with what they were doing to me. I had a new attorney because the original attorney had to go back to his regular corporate law job because that's the kind of free attorneys they give you. I had a new caseworker because the original caseworker, the lady that took my kids, flips the state vehicle. Thank God there were no children in the car. And totaled out the vehicle, and she was in the hospital for quite a while. So
That was the
everybody
second
changed.
DCF lady that had came to you.
Correct. That's the one that took the kids.
Mhm. And so thinking about the systemic issues, do you believe that your case reflects a larger pattern in the CPS or family courts?
without a doubt. There's multiple people. Look at the fact that there's 30 other families whose hair samples have been tainted by Lab Corp that have been affected and probably don't even know at this point that they've lost their children to something they didn't do.
This is information that you got how?
From a defect, I looked into my case that was working with the family therapist.
Mhm.
She looked into the case, was still a defects worker. They terminated her, and that's when she came forward to tell me what she found in my case because she couldn't tell me while she was still working.
Okay.
And I have
And
no knowing who this Lab Corp worker was. So,
well, but that's, that's neither here nor there for our purposes. It just leads way to the fact that there's collusion on a deeper level. It's not just the Department of Children and Families or CPS family courts and guardian ad litem. It's also other entities like, for example, the Lab Corp or whoever it was. Do you remember the name of the company that was used for your?
it was Lab Corp.
It was Lab Corp. Okay. I thought I remember you mentioning that. Um, so that shows a deeper level of coercion right there because it's collusion, Why would someone do that? And you and I may not know why someone would do something like that. But the point is that they have people in there and it could be an even systemic thing to where it's not just you that they're doing it to. It's not just this person that's doing it. It's actually
Well,
an infection of the actual lab core itself because of some kind of potentially some kind of financial benefit that they receive.
when I asked the question of how could something like this happen to the defects worker that is no longer a defects worker, she told me that what was told to her by the Lab Corp worker was that it was an accident and somehow it happened and they're not sure who all it happened to because I guess this hair scattered about. I don't know, maybe a fan caught it, who knows? But the hair scattered about, and the next thing you know, me and 30 other families have tainted hair samples now. So I
Wait,
have
and
no idea.
so that was actually something that someone said?
Yeah, this
Well,
was
then they're
told to
invalid tests.
this was told to the defects worker that is no longer a defects worker by a Lab Corp employee who admitted that there was wrongdoing with my hair sample when she asked questions.
Sounds like a cop out because all of those tests should have been recollected, not just processed anyways. That's like going to a restaurant and it being okay with OSHA that they dropped your steak on the floor, but they used the 3-second rule and rinsed it off really quick.
Yep,
That's not okay. And
it's
especially
sick.
where it comes to the safety and stability of children. So in your opinion, who benefits from these removals and prolonged court battles?
Defects, the states. The state of South Carolina is the one that profited. The group home profited. They are the ones that profited off of my children being in care. The foster family profited. Anybody that's taking care of this child or took custody of this child or touched this child is the ones that profited because they received money in one way, shape, or form from the federal government. Not to mention my child support.
It's exactly the idea that I had as well. So thinking of the resilience and the advocacy here in your case, what steps have you taken to fight back or seek justice? I'm sure that this isn't your first interview. This isn't the first step that you've taken to share your testimony. What else would you say that you've done to fight back or seek the justice that you feel you're entitled to?
Keep in mind, when this happened, I was a single parent, newly divorced. My children are mixed. I'm living in a pretty much dominant white area. The lady did not like mixed people. She definitely didn't like mixed relationships. I live down south. I'm in Georgia. So it's not, South Carolina at the time. That I was a target. I was a target because I was low income. I didn't have money to fight back. I didn't have money for an attorney. I didn't have money for anything. So by the time I saw a private counsel, They're talking about $25,000, $30,000 retainer fee. Even now, I don't have that kind of money, but I got smart. During COVID, I was bored. I went and I got my degree. I'm a paralegal now, 2.5 years from being an attorney. So I'm fighting the system back. If it takes me to file suit against the state of South Carolina, I've worked the past 4.5, 5 years now to do it. And I'm going to keep on working until I get it done. I'm going to fight back for
God.
my kids because they deserved better.
Praise God. And so it sounds like they took a difficult situation that you as a single parent were experiencing and completely exploited you and your children, took advantage of you, denied resources to you, and literally had zero remorse for doing it. Would you say that that's accurate?
Without a doubt. They didn't care I didn't have a roof over my head. They didn't care. They didn't care about taking my kids and what it was going to do to me mentally. I grew up in a very abusive childhood and household. That was already traumatizing enough. I suffer from full-blown PTSD, anxiety, and depression because of my childhood and my mother. They sent me for psychological testing because they wanted to see how unfit I was. And they found out. I'm not going to lie. I don't lie to anybody about anything. So when they found out about my PTSD and where it stemmed from, the psychiatrist told them, do not contact her biological parents at all. It's detrimental to her. You're going to give her flashbacks. You're going to bring on the PTSD. It's going to be traumatizing. Don't do it. What did they do? They called them and they informed them about my children being in custody, which is none of their business. And I told them not in any circumstances would they ever get custody of my kids, nor would I agree to it. They're completely volatile people. My children don't even know them. So then they've got the phone calls 60 times a day from my mother trying to get custody of my kids. And then I'm sitting here hysterical, worrying about, is that going to happen? Am I going to lose my kids to this crazy woman who's an alcoholic, who could do more damage to my
Who
kids than even
traumatized you
foster
as a
care?
child, from what it sounds like.
Exactly. But what right did they have after a psychologist told them, do not contact her biological parents, and did it anyway? And then the guardian ad litem is calling me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. They were not supposed to do that. Even the social worker, defects workers calling me. I shouldn't have done that. Well, they tried to tell you, you idiot. Why didn't you listen? You had an expert's opinion to tell you no, and you still did it anyway.
Careless handling of situations.
Well,
Very
that's my
careless,
private
at the very
information of
least.
my children. It's an abuse of power.
It sounds like they just had no interest in, protecting you or the children from any further harm. It just seems like it was just everything you've told me so far is just like they were constantly trying to incite more trauma, more pain, more
Yep.
difficulty, more
Yep.
problems to keep you
Yep.
down.
And then when I go to the family therapist and I'm upset, they want to put me in trauma therapy. Well, I guess the trauma needs to be from CPS, but nothing was ever addressed with that because they're the ones that started the trauma. I was okay. I was making sound, clear decisions regarding my children. They were attending school. They were clean. They were fed. They were healthy, other than my son's medical condition, but there was nothing that could be helped about that. He made every doctor's appointment. He was there. I was there. They took everything away from me. My daughter, I wanted to buy her a cello. She played cello in high school. Foster family took that from me. They went and bought her this $5,000 cello that they said I couldn't afford. And everything I tried to do backfired in my face every single time. Every time I turned around, I was beating my head on a brick wall.
So let me ask you, what advice would you give to other parents facing similar battles? If you had a chance to warn someone or give them a heads up or speaking to other families, what would your advice be?
If I had the money, I would have took my kids and got the heck out of South Carolina. I would have took off and went to another state. If I had the money, I would have left and I wouldn't be in the situation that I was in with defects. If you have people that are calling in fictitious reports, which is something that my mother did prior to this case, which led up to more issues with this case from all the false reporting. Find out who's doing it. You can do that. There's open records requests to find out who's calling in these fake reports. Prosecute. You need to. People don't have a right to just call in fake reports on you and accuse you of things that you've not done. I didn't know that. Don't let them violate your civil rights. Don't let them violate your parental rights. There's things that you can do to protect yourself and your children too. If I would have known, I wouldn't even open the door or bothered to call DFACS when that worker. I just thought I was being an honest person and teaching my kids the right thing about honesty and keeping appointments and doing what you're supposed to do. That's what I thought I was doing. I thought I was doing right. And it ended up being everything wrong.
If you could speak directly to lawmakers, what reform would you demand first? Like, first and foremost, what would you say to the lawmakers if you could speak to them directly?
Protect the family first. You protect the family. Keep them unified. There's no reason, if these kids don't have bumps, bruises, cuts, scrapes, broken bones, they deserve to stay with their parents. Parents go through situations. Not everybody is born with a silver spoon in their mouth with a bunch of money. Sometimes parents go through a job loss, a death in the family. It could be a multitude of things. Offer help. We've got federal benefits to take care of all these CEO bailouts and company bailouts. Why can't we bail out a family of 4? Get real. Offer food help. If these kids are coming to school hungry, maybe it's because the food bank doesn't have food in it anymore. There's so much homelessness. Help with transitional housing for a year or 2. Cut these people off Section 8 that don't need it and give it to a family that does. You got women that's been living in Section 8 with 5 and 6 kids for 10 years, driving a brand new car with their nails done and a fake weave. If you can afford all that, you can afford a property rental, not Section 8. Help the family first. There's money out there. Change the system. They've got to. This doesn't make sense anymore. This is just downright corruption.
Oh,
These
I
people
agree.
the lawyers golf together. The judges golf with the lawyers. It's the good old boy system. I've seen it firsthand. I'm a paralegal. They are all cronies. These small towns, they know you. They know your family. They know the attorney that's going to represent you. And trust me, there's a whole lot of backdoor talking going on. Don't trust the system. You can't. They are not to be trusted.
That's my sentiments almost exactly. In closing, what message would you like for your children or all children who might be caught in the CPS system to hear right now?
First message I want to give is not just to the children, but I want to give a message to the people, because people pour the haterade and the salt on when they hear about these stories. Oh, she must have did something. No, I didn't. But I tell you what, stay tuned for the book because it's getting ready to come out. And when it comes out, I've already got somebody to do the movie production. It's going to happen. And you'll see the truth for yourself. But to the kids, hang in there because we're trying to change the system for you guys to come home. You need to go home to your moms and dads who love you. You've not been forgotten. And we're working as hard as we can. We're trying to change it for anybody and everybody we can. The parents, hold on to those babies as tight as you can. Every visit, anytime you get them, don't give up hope. Just keep fighting. You have to. I still stayed fighting even when my kids were in custody. I didn't give up hope. I knew that at one point or another I was going to go after the state because I had to. What they did to me was wrong, and what they did to them was even worse. My son was sexually abused in custody. They violated my daughter by stealing things from her in the group home, twisting her head up, brainwashing her. Yeah, I'm coming for all of them.
Praise God. And how can the listeners of this story support families like yours or join this fight?
If there's petitions, sign them. Start organizing walks. Start organizing not quiet protests, but peaceful protests. Start contacting your lawmakers. There's things that you guys can do. You may not be directly involved or directly affected by what's happening, but you could be one day. Help us change the system to keep you from going through it for a future child you may have, or maybe your friend's kid that's going to end up in custody one day, because you never know. It could be you tomorrow.
Yeah, until it's until we put an end to this, crime against humanity through the Child Protective Services and the family courts, no one is protected, and it could literally happen. You're right, to anyone at any time, and I encourage you all to also find some way of donation, whether it's to a specific family on this podcast or whether it is to the organization's fund itself. I encourage you to make a donation if you are unable to put in your time or energy towards this. At least share the stories that you're hearing here about people's experiences. You can share it through social media. You can share it through links. You can share it through emails, through text messages, with anyone that you feel might listen or want to get involved with this fight for our freedom. And Jennifer, I thank you so much. You have been a blessing, and I completely am sympathizing with you because I too have been through much of similar situation, and my children as you and your children. And it's just a devastating experience for the children, especially, but for the parents who have to watch their children. And we literally have to stand by with our hands tied, in many cases, literally incarcerated, like you were saying, for things that you did not do just because they said that it was the sake of the child. And that is unlawful coercion, manipulation, and it is a violation of not only your parental and your civil and your constitutional rights, but also of federal and state laws. And therefore, it's punishable as an act of treason and crime against humanity. So I thank you so much. And I would hope that you would be available if anything else were to come up that I might need to, reconsult with you on. And, just so we can really get this message out there and push this out to as many people as possible, because unfortunately, there are still so many people who are unaware that these things are happening, and then still others who are just incapable of wrapping their mind around it. Like you say, they don't believe, or they think, oh, that they wouldn't do that, that you must have done something. And so that's traumatizing as well, because you're like, I'm literally, I need help, can you help me? And then they're, coming at you like you've probably done something wrong. And so it's just really important. My message to all the listeners is that we are stronger together on a grand scale, on a local scale. Community is of the utmost importance in these cases. And if we come together and we all take a stand and say no more all at once, something must be done. They will have no choice, because we, the people, outnumber these corrupt officials 160,000 to 1 or more. So in that, I really appreciate you. And I thank you so much for, being open and honest about this experience that you've had. And I fully encourage you to, move forward with your process and the legal program that you're taking. And I actually had considered something the same. And I even spoke that to the people who did the things that they did to me. And I'll be sharing my testimony at some point. I'll also be sharing the podcast with you, and I would ask that you would push it out to your Facebook or YouTube or whatever channels you have as far as social media to gain exposure, not for my podcast, but for the parents and the families and the testimony and the situation and the accountability that we are obviously due at this point. But yeah, we'll be in touch. And if you need some, emotional support or just somebody to bounce a few ideas off of, you keep me in mind. And you have my cell phone number, and we can touch base periodically.
Funny thing is, Megan, one of the last things my son told me before he passed away, he told me I was going to be a great lawyer one day. He said that I had purpose here and that I needed to be here. And he told me that I was going to do something big. And I think that something big is to help make change for these parents and these kids to stop things from happening that we went through.
Yeah. Amen. Even in his young years, with all of his trouble, he was still a wise young
We're
man.
tired. We are tired as a people in a community. You cannot keep abusing the people in community and think that they're going to stand behind you.
Mhm. Amen. So I would just like to close with a prayer and let you know that remind you that we have the prayer and support group on Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you're welcome to come. Even if it's late, you can join at any time, and I'll admit you. You can share your testimony. You can just listen to others. We're doing prayer for salvation. So if you want to get saved and and move into that direction, and become more, closer, more of a relationship with the Lord, that's an option. But I don't want my computer to shut off before I get to the prayer. It looks like I'm out of battery here. So in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I ask that we put our hand over in our hearts over the situation for Miss Jennifer and her family, whether past, present, or future, that they are covered by the blood of Jesus, and that they are walking in your word, and that they're growing closer and closer to you, Lord, and that you just keep your hand of protection over them. Know that they're working towards better life for themselves and for humanity as a collective. And bless the situation financially and help her, Jennifer, to move forward through her program and support her, because she needs you, Father. And I pray for you in Jesus' name, Jennifer. If you accept that prayer into your heart, and you build a relationship more with the Lord, then He will protect you. He's the reason we're still here. He's the reason we're still in this fight. And He's the reason that we're going to get the results that we seek.
Yep.
In Jesus'
Amen.
name, amen.
Marketing script 1. The invitation to listen. Short, powerful, eye contact delivery. Hey everyone, it's Reagan. I want to personally invite you to listen to my new podcast, a space where truth is spoken, stories are honored, and families finally get their voice back. You see, for years, CPS and family court system have operated in the shadows, removing children without cause, silencing parents, and weaponizing power against the vulnerable. But on this show, the silence ends. Every episode, I sit with parents, survivors, and advocates to talk openly, trauma-informed, judgment-free, about what really happens behind closed doors. Not rumors, not speculation, lived experience. If you've ever felt unheard, dismissed, or steamrolled by the system, this podcast is for you. If you're fighting for your children right now, this podcast is for you. If you've ever felt unheard, dismissed, or steamrolled by the system, this podcast is for you. If you're fighting for your children right now, this podcast is for you. And if you've never seen this, And if you've never seen this side of the system before, you need to. Click the link and listen. Your awareness, your voice, your presence, they matter. And together, we're reclaiming what was taken. Marketing script number 2, why these stories matter. Medium length, emotional, and informative. This is Reagan. I wanted to invite you to something powerful, a podcast dedicated to the families who were never supposed to be heard. Every week, I sit with parents who lived through wrongful removals, biased judges, corrupted CPS practices, and court systems that treat children like case numbers and dollar signs instead of human beings. These stories aren't just emotional. They're evidence of a national pattern that can't be ignored anymore. We talk about how the system turned against them, where their rights were violated, what really happened in courtrooms, the trauma their children endured, and the resilience it took to survive it all. If you've experienced this system or know someone who has, or you simply want to understand what's really happening in America's family courts, you need to hear these stories. Follow the podcast, share it, listen to the voices that were silenced, because this movement only grows when we stand together. Marketing script number 3, the mission, direct, mission-driven calls to action. Hey, this is Reagan. Hey, it's Reagan. Hey, it's Reagan. I created a podcast because too many families are being destroyed behind closed doors of CPS and family courts, and the world needs to hear the truth. This isn't a gossip show. This isn't sensationalized trauma. This is real testimony shared safely, with consent, and with deep respect. Every guest is a survivor. Every story is a piece of evidence. And every episode is part of a bigger movement to expose what's happening for far too long. And every episode is part of a bigger episode. And every episode is a part of a bigger movement to expose what's been happening for far too long. So I'm inviting you, come and listen. If you're fighting the system, if you've lived through it, or if you want to help end this corruption, this podcast will open your eyes and strengthen your voice. Hit follow, hit share. Let this be the beginning of a conversation that saves families. Marketing script number 4, short social media clip. If you've ever wondered what really happens inside CPS and family courts, you need to hear this. I started a podcast where parents and survivors share their truth safely, trauma-informed, and without judgment. These are the stories the system hoped you'd never hear, but we're telling them anyway. Click the link. Listen to an episode. This is how we reclaim our children and expose the corruption that's been hidden for far too long. Marketing script number 5, emotional, hope-centered, gentle, and uplifting. I'm inviting you to listen to a podcast born from pain, resilience, and truth. Families are being torn apart by CPS and the courts, and most people never get to tell their side of the story. But here, they do. We talked about heartbreak. We talk about heartbreak, yes, but also about strength, healing, advocacy, and what it means to fight for your children when the system fails you. If you need hope, if you need clarity, if you need to know you're not alone, please listen. Your story matters. And this podcast exists for you to prove it. And this podcast exists to prove it.